and welcome to this edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, right now India seems to be gasping for breath. Oxygen shortage for treatment of COVID patients is now the main issue in state after state, especially the worst hit states, but more and more cities and districts getting added to that. And the stories that are emerging are horrifying. As hospitals struggle to bring in more supply, they're also seeing a higher number of cases being admitted who need urgent oxygen support. We had stories today that emerged where patients died gasping for breath outside hospitals because there were no oxygenated beds available. We had stories coming in how people queued up and waited for hours to refill the oxygen cylinders. We had stories coming in of how people got into fights over getting an oxygen cylinder. And the worst of all, the most horrific incident in all of this, any which ways a tense situation, was what happened in Nashik. Now, we don't know what led to it, but a leakage in an oxygen tanker there created havoc in the hospital. This hospital that had a large number of patients who were in ICU, who were on oxygen, dependent on oxygen and oxygen supply. In that hospital, this tanker leaked and 22 people are now dead. An investigation will show of how much of this was linked to the cutoff in the oxygen supply, and the supply did get disrupted for at least half hour. Several of the patients had to be shifted out. The supply was disrupted for about 30 minutes. 24 patients, in fact, died. Another 30 and more were actually shifted very quickly to the other hospitals. But it is horrific. And even if it is a technical glitch, even if there was a safety issue, an in-depth investigation is required to find out what went wrong. Could we have saved these lives? Tonight, we put the spotlight on how to tackle India's oxygen shortage right now. While the top doctors tell us that we must also be judicious in our use, switch off the oxygen tankers and generators when not needed, not be overly dependent on oxygen supply if your oxygen saturation levels are already in the 90s. And of course, be careful about not having these kind of oxygen tanker accidents. The larger story is that people do need oxygen to beat COVID. And for that, what is the solution? What are the possible options we can look at? That's what I want to talk about right now. Sudden massive spike in cases. Breathlessness, which is a massive symptom and a massive problem in the COVID infections we are seeing in the second wave. Shortage of cylinders and tankers is only adding to the problem. In some cases, we have the oxygen in the industries which have now been disallowed from using it, but we don't know how to put it in a cylinder. We need a bottle plant for that. We need cylinders for that. And then we have to figure out the transportation. While we have started off some trains, that obviously is going to take some amount of time to transport them from one part of the country to the other part of the country. And of course, we didn't learn enough lessons from the first time around when we should have gone about on a faster basis, on an emergent basis, to set up more PSA plants. We didn't do enough. But what can we do now? That's the question I'm asking our experts tonight, which is why this isn't a political debate, but a debate with those from this sector who can give us some constructive solutions as to what must be done. Let's say good evening to Subasish Guha Roy, Managing Director of the Universal Air Products Private Limited. Dr. Ashok Seth, he's a cardiologist and chairman of the Fortis Escorts Heart Institute. Saket Tiku, member of the Oxygen Committee under the Commerce Ministry in Government of India, is the president of the All India Industrial Gases Manufacturers Association. And Dr. Harish Irani, director at the CMERI, who joins us this evening. Let me first start off with what the current scenario is and all the options that are being put into place. Saket Tiku, let's begin with you. One of the big things that last time you joined us on the show indicated was, of course, starting of the trains. And that has now been implemented. But even now, on a daily basis, cities like Delhi are facing shortage. Yesterday, there was an SOS sent. They got some supply in the morning. By evening, hospitals began to say again they're out of supply, and now more is being sent across. But what is the overall solution picture that we are looking at?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. You see, Government of India has done the mapping of all the states and UTs. Every state has been told that from which plant you are going to get oxygen. It is a very professional way of doing things. Everything has been, all the mapping has been done by DPIIT, Ministry of Commerce, Government of India. So Government of India is doing the job. All the systems are in place. But what's happening, unfortunately, it is not being followed and implemented by some of the district authorities. Some of the district authorities are not allowing the oxygen to go from their state to another state. For example, you've been talking about New Delhi. Now, Delhi does not have any oxygen plant, any liquid oxygen manufacturing unit in Delhi. So what's happening now? Today morning also I got a message that Faridabad decided not to send supplies from their state to New Delhi. Yesterday it happened with the UP not cooperating and not allowing the vehicles to go to New Delhi. And same thing happened with Uttarakhand. Now, if the district authorities or decide, to and not respect what the mapping done by the GOI, there is a very clear-cut instructions given by GOI. Home Secretary has given a letter on 18th September last year. Again, those letters have been given saying you cannot stop oxygen going from one state to another. There has to be a free movement. Oxygen does not belong to any state. If the oxygen plant is in Haryana or in UP, it does not belong. It belongs to them. It is for the people. It's for the nation. On their own, the decisions are being taken that we will not allow the oxygen to go to another state. No, this is setting up the issues, in a place like New Delhi. Now, today, when this Faridabad thing happened, we had to flag this issue to the Home Secretary's office. With the intervention, then it was allowed. So every time we cannot keep on flagging the issue. Why can't the district authorities kind of listen to what the instructions and the guidelines have been given to them by GOI? Systems are in place. They just need to follow it. I understand there's a crisis. I've been telling so many times that, listen, we need to rationalize the use of oxygen because the demand is more than what we are producing at the moment. We're dipping in the stocks. Steel Authority has come to our, it's helping the country. They have willingly, they're cooperating and they're giving the oxygen to us. The unfortunate part is we have oxygen, but it is in the wrong place, in a way that oxygen deficit states are, say, Maharashtra, Gujarat, or Delhi, or some places, but the oxygen, I told last time also, it is in the eastern part. So it is taking us some time to trunk the liquid from surplus areas to the deficit areas. We need to wait, but if we do not wait, and some of the officers go rogue, and they try to stop the supplies, so the entire system fails. It has a cascading effect. So we are having these issues. It has been flagged to the GOI, to the Home Secretary, and to the highest authority. And I hope things fall in line. And
let me ask you this.
I'm sorry, am I audible,
Is
please?
the entire oxygen scenario right now, the supply and the demand and the delivery are being centrally handled just by the central government, or are the states also empowered to figure out their own options, to seek whatever they have either within the state or talk to other states and try and bring it in? Or is it right now being only centrally done, where you map all the available options, see what's closest to which city, and then accordingly direct it?
Okay, let me give you an example. Now, Maharashtra has an installed capacity of 1,200, and they're using more than the installed capacity. Now, what do Maharashtra do? So GOI has mapped the plants which are giving them oxygen from the other states like Chhattisgarh, Bellary, and the train which was sent to Vizag is with the help of the GOI, with the help of the Indian Railways as well. So the Government of India has to chip in, and they have to come and help the states, and they are doing it. Now, they have done the mapping. All the states have to follow that mapping. You can't act on your own. Those days are gone. Because now GOI has some system in place, we need to follow that. It's so simple. But see, some states are doing an excellent job. Maharashtra is doing an excellent job. And it's not, since we have limited, oxygen is not limited. I've been telling this so many times. We have limitation with the installed capacity. Yes, we are ramming up the production, but it cannot be, we cannot double up the capacity. Cases are multiplying fast. The only solution, what I feel the immediate solution, apart from ramping up, is that please understand there's a huge mismatch between the active cases you have and the rate at which you're consuming oxygen. Why I say Maharashtra is a very good example for other states to follow, or even Kerala. With 6.8 lakh active cases, they're using around 1,200, 1,300 metric tons of oxygen a day. But other states, with 100,000 cases, 60,000 cases, are using around 900 tons? And now they're asking for 1,500 tons of oxygen. So my request to which I feel can really help us, if Ministry of Health, they have recommended some flow rates. Now these flow rates need to be kind of fixed for every state. There is no reason, I do not know why one state is consuming, a place like Maharashtra is not consuming much of oxygen. The oxygen consumption requirement is more because there are more number of active cases. But if you see the ratio in which they are using is less. And so is the case with Kerala.
Okay, that's one way of looking at it for sure. Provided some of the other states are actually giving us their real numbers, and especially when it comes to serious cases, we found in some of the states they're not telling us what the real death cases are and data is, so we don't know even if they're giving us the true picture when it comes to actual cases who may be needing oxygen as well. But I get your point, and it's unfortunate that even in this something as critical as oxygen, we are actually seeing bickering between the states and each trying to gobble up more or protect their own turf, which is effectively derailing the overall central plan. Let me also bring in Mr. Subasish Guha Roy. Mr. Roy, give us a sense as well from your point of view, if you can add to what Saket Tiku is saying. How is this distribution really going on? Is there some amount of confusion and chaos there as well from your point?
First of all, I would like to thank you for having me on the show. I think Saket has touched upon the overall picture. He has explained very clearly on the whole country. So I will confine myself to what is happening in Bangalore especially. This time in Bangalore, the sudden surge is something which we could never ever imagine. It never happened in the first wave also. The second wave, I think it took everybody by shock. Every day we are getting nearly 10,000 plus cases in Bangalore. All the hospitals are overwhelmed. It is something it's very sad to see, the way patients are suffering. The doctors are trying to do their best. Sometimes patients are, a lot of people are calling me, even our friend circles, people who are getting infected, they're calling us, can you get us some admission somewhere? We have been trying to help them out. But luckily, we have the infrastructure to supply. We have a lot of vehicles, tanker, cylinders, small tanks. We have been able to supply. The issue here is the liquid oxygen, the basic raw material. Like we in particular have a 40-ton plant wherein we can produce oxygen. But suddenly our requirement has doubled. It has gone up to 80 ton. Now this is why we have been requesting the state government to pitch in. And to be very honest, the government has been very proactive. The health minister, the industry minister, Mr. Jagdish Shettar in particular, and Mr. Tejashwari Surya, MP Bangalore South. Like we had a meeting with him, he has called so many times, he has been calling, asking what help do you want? In Karnataka, there are major steel plants which are there in Ballari. They have come forward, especially JSW. They are the saviors for people in Karnataka. They have been giving to an extent of around 500 tons. So even Mr. Surya spoke to them. He has organized 40 tons for us. If the same help, if JSW can continue for some more time, I tell you, Bangalore, people will not suffer. We can distribute, we can take care. The only challenge which we are having in the small hospitals, unlike in bigger hospitals, they have bigger storage capacity. They have 1 week storage capacity. So, when 2 days stock is there, we can replenish them. What we are facing problem in Bangalore with the small hospitals, they have small 1 tank, 2 tank, because we storing, the space constraint, we cannot put more cylinder tanks and all that. We refill them in the morning, by afternoon it is over. They want again a refill. And vehicles to reach on time, it's very difficult. Then they say, we are going to run out, 1 hour you have to come. Every hospital is saying the same thing in smaller 100, 150 bed hospital. This is where we are finding it difficult. So this is something which we are trying to address it out. But when the raw material is made available to us, apart from what we produce, 40 tons have been made available to us. So, with this last 2 days, we have been able to control. Otherwise, always in front of our filling station, we were having ambulances of 40, 50 ambulances standing. It's very pathetic to see that, instead of carrying, patients, they are carrying oxygen cylinder. But I'm proud that our, team, workers, drivers, they have all risen up to the occasion, and they're 24/7 they're serving. People have not gone home, 10 days they have not gone home. They're sleeping here in trucks, distributing wherever we are asking them to go. This is something very good what is happening so far. But only challenge, one more challenge which we are facing this time is, unlike first wave, we were getting some product from the neighboring states, which is not happening this time. Whereas the product is going from Karnataka to other states, I do agree, it is also part of India, only other states and all are Indians. But still, I would say this state where the production is happening in such large volume, if they can give some more to this state, all the problems will be solved. I personally feel we can take care of it. So this is what is happening. And then one more challenge which we are facing is small industries. Where here in Pinia, where I am situated, and where the major, the industries are there, they're all small scale industry. We have around 2,000 odd small scale industries. Around 4 lakh people are employed. They are all saying what we have to do. Our workers are idling. They're all migrant workers. They will go away if we don't give work. We have to pay salaries. This is something which we are unable to handle. We have a big challenge giving to all the hospitals. They are saying, no, you have to give it to us also, some quantity. Where government is saying, no, you have to give preference to hospital. We do agree, lives have to be saved. But how do we overcome this is something we are unable to convince our industrial customers. They say, orders are getting cancelled. But we are saying then others also will not be able to do it. So this is something which government need to address. But the state government has been very proactive. They are trying to help us out. Every day they are calling for a meeting. They have made so many committees. Like now, our vehicles free movement they have organized. It is good, something which we are very happy the state government involvement in this so far.
So thank you for also pointing out what is needed, because we want to have a conversation about what else can be done to improve the situation, to ease the situation further. Now, if I may just go across to our other panelists, and Dr. Ashok said to you first, I can't even begin to imagine the stress and the tension that hospital authorities would be going day after day after day as more and more people keep calling for beds and oxygen support beds, and that you have very limited supply. I mean, I was just looking at what's happening in Delhi, and hospital after hospital, yesterday first came out and put out an SOS from Apollo to Max Hospital, Manipal Hospitals also said so, and each one of them, in the night they got some. And then tonight, again, we are looking at the same situation. Do take us through, the experiences that you all are having on the floor of these hospitals.
You're so correct. In fact, over the last 24 hours, every hospital has been crying and saying that they only got a few hours of oxygen supply left. But the heart-wrenching situation around that is, what really if that happens and suddenly the oxygen pressure goes down, and we have a number of patients on the ventilator. We, at the moment, at the Fortis Escorts Heart Institute, have a 12-hour supply till 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I was just going through, just before your program, as to how many people do we have in the ventilators, what do we do? Do we start bagging them if the supplies don't come in, and so on and so forth. But what's important is also to start understanding something which is ironic. You see, it's nice to hear that it has to be a coordinated effort, suppliers, producers, government, and centralized structure which actually distributes it. But let's say, what do we do on site, on the ground, as if we are the ones who are managing the patients, and we can never think of a situation where oxygen is not there and a patient dies in front of our eyes. Because of lack of oxygen, it's never happened before. The ironic issue is that we've always thought of oxygen, the most important agent to keep someone alive, as an automatic situation. We never realize it's the rarest commodity that it can actually be in certain situations as of now. So in a way, what I'm saying is that we have the ability to decrease oxygen use, which had never gone through our minds for years and years of usage of oxygen, because we never really came to a situation where there was true oxygen shortage. We have felt that the oxygen is around us in the air. It keeps everybody alive. So let's tell you that exactly what we can do on the ground and have already started doing. For example, all routine surgeries from tomorrow, and these are non-emergent surgeries, are cancelled so that we have enough, we can actually extend our oxygen usage. But we also, and this is, remember, there is an overuse of oxygenation due to panic. Most people are used to seeing their oxygen saturations around 97, 98. And for the whole of last year, we have emphasized to people that when at home, the moment you start seeing a saturation of 94, you need to be admitted. You need to be scared. You need to rush into the hospital. You need to contact a doctor. And that figure of 94 stays with people, even though now, over a period of greater experience and greater therapies, we realize that people at even saturations of 90 to 92 do well. So what happens when these 94% come into the hospital? Many of the doctors give them enough oxygen to bring their oxygen saturations to 97 and 98, and the patients also feel better seeing those saturations. And yet again, we've realized that all you need to do is maintain saturations between 90 and 93 to get the best results. There is obviously many of those who even improve their oxygenation
Okay.
by just even at home lying in a prone position and suddenly seeing the oxygen go up. Non-invasive ventilation is a better method than giving high flow nasal oxygens, which take away nearly 80 liters in an hour. So we've got numerous options to decrease oxygen utilization. In fact, I'm not saying decrease, appropriate oxygen utilization. So today, our task force, the COVID task force, immediately created a 18, 10, 11, 10 commandments to utilization of oxygen in the most appropriate manner as evidenced at today. And we believe that with those 10 commandments that we actually have put out for every doctor to apply on his patients, be it at home and be it in the hospital, and more concentrators at home rather than oxygen cylinders, we believe that we can decrease our utilization by at least 10 to 15%, if not more. Every bit of oxygen, appropriate utilization counts, and inappropriate utilization should be considered as a waste. And perhaps this is the good habit that we need to get into right now, which will stand us in good stead for quite some time to come. Yes, the situation is disastrous. It pains me, it hurts me, and I hope that we don't come to a situation where our patients die because oxygen is needed. I hope that doesn't happen. I urge and I implore to the government and to everyone around us, the patients dying in front because of lack of oxygen should never happen in a country, in any country, let alone India, where we had the ability and have the ability to prop up our infrastructure and give the best to our patients. It's our duty, it's our priority, it's the nation's priority. The government has to be fully aware of its responsibilities.
Okay. Let me also bring in Dr. Harish Hirani. Thank you for patiently waiting. Dr. Harish, you've also exhaustively written about, what can be done and various options which are there. And I wanted to ask you this question. So we've looked at dipping into the industrial oxygen setups and diverting them. We've also spoken about how we need to be careful and judicially use our oxygen in our hospitals. We're looking at a more organized setup in terms of distribution, bringing in trains to transport it. What else can we look at? Are there still other institutions, factories or industries or research houses where there is oxygen supply that we can dip into? And why not use Air Force to airlift cylinders and get them to the places of need in a faster manner?
Yeah, so we at the CSIR, we do slightly different research. Maybe the terminology is oxygen concentrator because we understand that there is oxygen almost 20.86% in air. So can we selectively absorb the nitrogen or some other element? Can we increase the concentration of oxygen? So we have developed three different kind of products. One is what we call the oxygen enrichment unit. where the oxygen is getting reached by up to 35%. Instead of 21%, it's 35%. Because one report says that if the little bit oxygen extra is given to the patient, particularly in a COVID situation, he or she will revive much faster pace. It is not they require 95%, 96% oxygen. And it was also the film panelists, they mentioned also that we are using excess oxygen many times. So that was the oxygen enrichment unit, which was developed by the NCL. And it has been also transferred to one of companies, so it's in a production mode. We also have developed a complete plant as such. That means we don't really require the logistic. We don't have to carry the cylinders. In one hospital directly, we can install complete plant, and then from here, the oxygen can be concentrated to the 95, 96%. And maybe then it can be judicially utilized. Third one, which is a mixture of these two, it is a kind of the oxygen enrichment and concentration, which we have developed at the CSR CMERI. In the situation, we are also keeping a cost effectiveness, because many times industry, they want to really make the product, but the cost is a primary consideration. And that's why we have made a product which is cost effective, and it gives a wider range. Let's take what I'm trying to convey here. If I change a cylinder, like we require a oil-free cylinder and the pressure compressor in this case. So compressor flow is less like a 70 LPM. We can get up to 5 LPM oxygen directly, then up to 95, 96%. If the compressor, then the pressure is changed to 120 LPM, then a percentage of oxygen goes to 10 LPM. If it goes to the 180, it goes to 15. So same technology can be utilized. Now, instead of going for the big hospital, we can think about the small clinic which have a 5-bed, 10-bed. So in the situation, people and the patient, they don't have to really go in a big queues and stand outside the big hospitals. Even a near kind of the Mohalla clinic, and they can really get admitted there, and they can really get appropriate treatment, particularly from oxygen enrichment point of view. So these are the products which we have developed. We have transferred the technologies also to the parties. Like one of the party who got now the 50 unit order from MP government, and then they will be supplying in 2 weeks time. What they mentioned in 4 weeks time, they will be giving 100 units. Tomorrow also we are transferring a technology to another party who is planning to go ahead almost with the 50,000 units, manufacturing of 50,000 units. In along with that, we also have expression of interest also, where the 4 or 5 companies are approached. They are trying to come up, understand our technology, and maybe it will really help. So if India can survive maybe the 2 weeks or 3 weeks with the imported oxygen, what the government is doing, almost a 50,000 ton they have importing the oxygen. So I think this kind of small unit can really come in a big way in India, and it can help in a big way also. And I agree with the panelists that the oxygen percentage, unnecessarily we should not be feeding 95% or 96%. Many times a 40% or the FiO2, which you use the word, FiO2 is a 40, 50, it will be more than sufficient, particularly for the not a very, very critical patient. Because if you look at the overall the COVID patient, we find that only 20% patient really required oxygen or ventilator. And on this out of 20, 15% oxygen therapy is sufficient. Only 5% really we require ICU beds. So if we go logistically appropriate manner,
Okay.
and I think we utilize our resources appropriately, things will be in control. Yes, please.
Okay, I have 2 more questions very quickly before we wrap this up. One to Saket Tiku. Saket Tiku, I read a few reports, and I'm not too sure of how big this problem is. Is the lack of machinery to bottle this oxygen and lack of cylinders also a big issue, that we have the supply in certain industries but we can't immediately bring it to use?
See, we have enough oxygen at the moment, but it cannot last the way some states are consuming it. Flow rate of the oxygen needs to be fixed by the government. I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying just fix whatever it is, but my co-panelist, doctor, I must compliment him. He made things easier for me. when he said we don't have to use high flow oxygen at 60 lpm or 80 lpm. Some of the states are using 60 lpm. Some of the states are using just somewhere between 12 and maximum 20 lpm. So we need to cut down on the flow. It is a guzzler. Some of the states are guzzling oxygen. We can't afford it. We have to find ways how to use, oxygen, in a judicious way. I've been telling the use of oxygen needs to be rationalized. The only way we have limitations with enhancement of ramping up the production. But what we can do is at least follow some states. Maharashtra is a very good example. There is no harm if other states talk to these to Maharashtra or to Kerala and learn how they are not how they have put a check on the consumption pattern of oxygen. There's no harm in learning. See, GEO is doing their job. Out of way box thinking is happening. Like import of oxygen, it might work, it might not work. But at least whenever we are starting something new, challenges are going to be there. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But at least GOI is giving it a shot. Whether it was railways, now it is import or.
But here is the question: why aren't we using our air fleet and our air force to transport it faster? I mean, for trucks to roll on onto trains, for train to go from Maharashtra to Vizag and then bring it back is obviously going to take a longer time than if we just had to deploy a plane to bring it across. Or are there any technical issues in terms of air transport of oxygen?
See, liquid oxygen cannot be, as far as I'm concerned, cannot be airlifted. It's a cryogenic, it is stored and ferried in cryogenic vessels. It is at minus 183 degrees. So there are safety hazards, cannot be airlifted, and such huge volume of oxygen cannot be. Yes, small 700, 800 liters of oxygen in small containers, that too very limited. For emergency purposes, our Air Force can do that. I'm not a final authority on that. Let the Air Force or Defense, make a call on this. But as far as I'm concerned,
sure, no, of course. I mean, that has to come as a decision. It has to come from the government side and, of course, the defense forces. But I was just trying to understand if there are technical challenges involved, which you, pointed out, which has to be kept in mind. Dr. Ashok said, final word from you on the current situation and the way forward. I think the next 2-3 weeks are going to be extremely critical. Is there anything missing in our current policy that we can change quickly? I mean, a lot of the solutions would probably help us much later in terms of setting up new plants or even ordering import of oxygen, which will only reach here after some time. What else can be done on an urgent basis?
I think this is the centralized coordination. I was very happy to see the fact that your panel actually had the key stakeholders in the whole chain of how oxygen has to be given to the patient. And I was also very happy to see that this was not a blame game issue. This was actually coordinating activities around a whole spectrum of stakeholders who have key roles to play in actually getting over this crisis. And that's the best and most important thing. Even I have to be a part of the crisis. I have to hold my responsibilities, just like I stated, as everybody else. And if we work together in a centralized manner and a coordinated manner, and I certainly don't believe that the state should be handling it, the center, because that's the only way to coordinate these activities in a clear, non-biased manner, then I believe that we will overcome and overcome this crisis in a very short time. Parallel to it, of course, is the control of the COVID pandemic, which has a number of ways to actually control it, because clearly what's happening is that the pandemic is overtaking us brutally, and that is why we are in the shortages of all aspects of treatment, and oxygen being one of the most important treatment aspects for these patients. So let's get together. We're going to win the battle. Let's do it at all fronts. Oxygen is only one aspect, and it's an important aspect, but there are others. And we certainly don't need to actually be going out there. We certainly need to double mask up. We certainly need to hold our responsibilities even as a public. And we certainly need to make sure that we don't keep gathering and we don't have blame games. Those are the very important aspects to win this war that we are in against this COVID disease process and the virus itself.
Very well said, Dr. Seth. I mean, this is a war and we all need to come together against the common enemy, which is COVID right now, attacking us from all fronts. And while our first focus for tonight was oxygen, you've actually, in a way, set up the stage for my next conversation, which will be on shortage of other life-saving infrastructure, including, hospital beds. Thank you so much to all of the panelists for joining in, for highlighting where the problem lies. Where are we going right? Where are we going wrong? And what further needs to be done? One big takeaway, the state and the centers need to work on it together. We cannot afford to have a situation where states are trying to hoard the oxygen for themselves, refusing to share it with others who may also need it equally. We also need to work in a centralized manner so that wherever the oxygen is present and available, it can be properly diverted to places which are in dire need. With the biggest of his cities, from Mumbai to Bengaluru, Ahmedabad, Bhopal, Lucknow, and Delhi, all of these and many more are right now facing a massive crunch when it comes to oxygen, and these states have been repeatedly raising that issue. Oxygen Express aside, there is a lot more that has to be done. Some of those suggestions and the technical aspects shared by CSIR. We need to look into these options wherever there is oxygen available and see how quickly it can be bottled, packaged and shared with those who need it on the urgent basis. We cannot be losing lives for want of oxygen in our country. Thank you for joining us.